Imagine plunging hundreds of feet into pitch-black, freezing water. You can't see your own hands. You're wearing a heavy diving suit, breathing a mixture of helium and oxygen that makes your voice sound like a cartoon character. And in your hands is a welding torch that burns at 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, creating a pocket of gas underwater so you can fuse solid steel together. One wrong move, one tiny miscalculation in the pressure around you, and your life could end in an instant. This isn't a sci-fi movie. This is the reality of an underwater welder. And while it is widely considered one of the most dangerous jobs on the planet, it is also one of the most lucrative. We're talking about a career path where top-tier professionals can pull in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, sometimes working only 6 months out of the 12. But how do you actually get there? You don't just put on a scuba tank and grab a blowtorch. There is a grueling, highly specific ladder you have to climb. Today, we are breaking down every single level of an underwater welder's career, from the muddy, unpaid boots of a tender all the way to the absolute pinnacle of human endurance, the saturation diver. We're going to look at the money they make, the massive risks they take, and why so many of them are forced to retire before they even hit 40. So, let's dive in. Level 1 doesn't even start in the water. It starts in the classroom and the welding booth. Before you can ever think about welding underwater, you have to be a phenomenal welder on dry land. The old saying in the industry is that they don't teach divers how to weld, they teach welders how to dive. Commercial dive school is a grueling process that takes anywhere from 5 to 7 months and can cost upward of $20,000. And here is the brutal truth. A massive percentage of people who start dive school never finish. It's a weed-out process designed to test your claustrophobia, your panic responses, and your mechanical aptitude. But let's say you survive. You graduate. You get your commercial diving certification. Are you going to be an underwater welder making 6 figures right out of the gate? Not even close. At level 1, you are what the industry calls a tender. A tender is basically a diver's apprentice, and your job is to stay on the surface, manage the diver's umbilical cord, which supplies their air, communications, and power, and hand them tools. You are the lowest rung on the ladder. You're doing the heavy lifting, cleaning the gear, and learning the ropes. During this phase, you might be making anywhere from $40,000 to $55,000 a year. It's not glamorous, and it requires intense physical labor, often in brutal weather conditions on the deck of a barge or an oil rig. This brings me to a question I want to ask all of you watching. Knowing the upfront cost of the schooling and the grueling reality of starting at the absolute bottom as a tender, do you think this initial investment of time and money is worth the potential payoff later on? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments because the barrier to entry here is seriously steep. But let's say you put in your time. You grind it out as a tender for a year or two, you prove you're reliable, and you finally get broken out. That means you are officially a working commercial diver. Welcome to Level 2, the Inland Welder. Inland welding is exactly what it sounds like. You are working in rivers, lakes, nuclear power plants, dams, and sewage treatment facilities. Yes, sewage. As an inland diver, your salary bumps up, usually ranging from $60,000 to $90,000 a year, depending on your hours and the region. But the conditions are arguably some of the worst you will ever experience. In the ocean, you might have some visibility. In a river or a lake, you are working by Braille. The water is often completely opaque. You are navigating by touch in freezing cold, fast-moving water, trying to repair bridge footings or lay pipes. And inland diving introduces one of the most terrifying hazards in the entire profession: delta P, or differential pressure. Imagine a small crack in a pipe underwater. The pressure inside the pipe is lower than the pressure of the water outside. The water wants to rush into that crack to equalize the pressure. If a diver gets too close to that crack, the force of the water rushing in can be thousands of pounds of pressure, pinning the diver against the pipe, or even pulling them through an incredibly small opening. It is an invisible, silent killer, and it is a constant threat for inland divers working around dams and valves. You are constantly hyper-aware of your surroundings, even when you can't see them. If you survive the inland circuits and want to chase the real money, you have to move to the ocean. Welcome to Level 3, the Offshore Welder. This is where the massive paychecks begin, but it comes at a severe lifestyle cost. Offshore welders work on oil rigs, deep-sea pipelines, and large oceanic structures, primarily in places like the Gulf of Mexico or the North Sea. At this level, you can expect to make anywhere from $90,000 to over $150,000 a year. The pay structure here is usually a base day rate, plus depth pay, meaning the deeper you go, the more money you make per foot. But working offshore means leaving your life behind. You might be stationed on a rig or a dive support vessel for 4 to 6 weeks at a time, working grueling 12-hour shifts every single day without a day off. You are entirely isolated from the outside world, your friends, and your family. The diving is deeper, the equipment is heavier, and the stakes are exponentially higher. You are dealing with volatile ocean currents, massive aquatic life, and the very real danger of decompression sickness, also known as the bends. When you dive deep, nitrogen builds up in your bloodstream. If you come up too fast, that nitrogen forms bubbles in your blood and joints, causing agonizing pain, paralysis, or even death. So, here's another question for you. Do you think the massive jump in salary justifies spending more than half the year completely isolated from your family on an oil rig? Drop a comment below. I'm genuinely curious how many of you would trade your time and freedom for that kind of hazard pay. Now, for the elite few who have the psychological fortitude, the physical endurance, and the technical skill to push past the normal limits of human biology, there is one final, ultimate tier. Welcome to Level 4, the Saturation Diver. Saturation diving is the pinnacle of the underwater welding career. It is an extremely exclusive club, and it is where the mind-boggling wealth is generated. Saturation divers can make $200,000, $300,000, or even $400,000 a year. They often get paid well over $1,000 a day. But the things they have to do to earn that money are almost incomprehensible to the average person. When you need to repair a pipeline at a depth of 500 or even 1,000 feet, you can't just dive down, do the work, and come back up. The decompression time required to safely return to the surface from that depth would take days. So, instead of bringing the diver back to surface pressure, the industry decided to do something insane. Keep the diver at the pressure of the ocean floor for weeks at a time. As a saturation diver, you live in a pressurized hyperbaric chamber on the deck of a ship. This chamber is no bigger than a small camper van, and you share it with 2 or 3 other guys. You eat, sleep, and live inside this tiny steel tube for up to 28 days straight. The pressure inside the chamber is identical to the pressure at the bottom of the ocean. Because oxygen becomes toxic at high pressures, you breathe a special mixture of helium and oxygen. This makes everyone sound like Donald Duck, completely altering the pitch of your voice to the point where communication requires special decoding software. When it's time to work, you climb into a diving bell, which is basically a pressurized elevator that lowers you hundreds of feet down to the ocean floor. You swim out, do your welding in the pitch-black abyss, and then return to the bell, which brings you back up and locks onto the hyperbaric chamber. You never decompress. You remain under hundreds of atmospheres of pressure for almost a month. When the job is finally done, the decompression process alone takes roughly 1 day for every 100 feet of depth. That means you might spend a full week just sitting in a sealed tube, slowly letting the pressure equalize back to sea level so your blood doesn't boil. It is an extreme psychological challenge. You are essentially an astronaut, living in a hostile environment, completely dependent on the life support systems maintained by the crew on the surface. This extreme environment is why saturation divers make the wealth they do. It's the hazard pay to end all hazard pay. By the way, if you are fascinated by these deep dives into the financial realities and hidden economics of extreme blue-collar careers, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We explore the high-stakes industries that build our world, breaking down the true cost and the massive wealth behind these jobs. Hit subscribe, and let's keep going. Because here is the dark side of that incredible wealth. There is a reason you rarely see a 50-year-old saturation diver. The human body is simply not meant to endure those kinds of pressures and environments. The physical toll of an underwater welding career is staggering. Aside from the immediate risks of drowning, hypothermia, or explosive decompression, there are insidious long-term effects. Breathing mixed gases under pressure for years can lead to a condition called dysbaric osteonecrosis, which is essentially the death of bone tissue, particularly in the shoulders and hips, caused by microbubbles of nitrogen destroying the bone marrow. And let's not forget the welding itself. Welding produces highly toxic fumes. When you are welding in a dry, hyperbaric habitat deep underwater, or even just working with heavy industrial machinery, you are exposed to chemicals and physical stress that age your body at an accelerated rate. Many underwater welders burn out or suffer career-ending injuries before they hit age 40. The massive paychecks are essentially front-loading a lifetime of earnings into a 10 or 15-year window, which brings us to the final stage of the career. Level 5, the consultant, supervisor, or topsides inspector. When a diver's body can no longer take the pressure, or when they finally decide they've had enough of living in a steel tube, the smartest ones leverage their massive wealth of experience to stay in the industry on dry land. Because underwater welding is such a specialized niche, companies are desperate for veteran divers to manage their operations. Level 5 is where you transition from the muscle to the brain. Supervisors run the dive control station, managing the gas mixtures, monitoring the health of the saturation divers, and coordinating the massive logistical dance required to keep men alive at the bottom of the sea. It requires immense focus and experience because the lives of the divers are literally in the supervisor's hands. Other veterans become ROV, remotely operated vehicle, pilots, using advanced robotics to perform deep-sea welding and inspections from the safety of a control room. Or they become highly paid inspectors, analyzing the structural integrity of offshore rigs and bridges. At this level, you can still easily make well over $150,000 a year, but you get to sleep in a real bed, breathe normal air, and actually see the sun. You maintain the wealth-building potential of the industry, but you eliminate the physical destruction of the diving itself. The ultimate goal for any smart underwater welder is to survive level 4 long enough to build a massive nest egg, and then transition to level 5 to preserve their health and their life. So, when we look at the entire life cycle of an underwater welder, it's a fascinating economic equation. It is one of the few blue-collar paths where a person without a college degree can genuinely make neurosurgeon money. But the price you pay is extracted directly from your body and your time. You are trading years of your life, total isolation from your family, and taking on extreme physiological risks for the chance to build massive, accelerated wealth. I want to know your final verdict. Now that you know the brutal reality of the training, the invisible dangers of Delta P, the isolation of offshore rigs, and the psychological endurance test of saturation diving, would you do this job for $300,000 a year? Could you handle living in a pressurized tube for a month straight, just for the paycheck? Drop your honest answer in the comments below. Underwater welding is a testament to human engineering and endurance. It proves that there is incredible wealth out there for those willing to do the jobs that most people are terrified to even think about. Until next time, stay safe and keep building your own path to wealth.